All right, good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're joining from. And thank you for joining today's webinar. This is the second webinar in the FHWA AASHTO TAM webinar series, mini-series. And today's webinar is Risk Busters, Unleashing the Power of Effective Organizational Risk Management. My name is Brad Allen. I'm with Applied Pavement Technology, and I was the project manager and support of FHWA's development of the materials highlighted in this webinar series, and I will serve as your facilitator today. So transportation agencies' ability to manage their highway systems can be impacted by unexpected and unplanned events, such as revenue disruptions and natural hazards. Managing these uncertainties through risk management is an integral part of modern leadership practices and a component of every transportation asset management plan. The FHWA initiated this project to advance the consideration of financial and organizational risks in transportation asset management plans, or TAMPs. Several resources were developed under the project to illustrate strategies for managing these types of risks, including two webinars. Today, we will feature the second of these webinars, focusing on identifying and managing organizational risks. Before we get started, there are a couple of disclaimers from FHWA. Except for the statutes and regulations cited, the content of this presentation do not have the force and effect of law and are not meant to bind the states or public in any way. This presentation is intended only to provide information regarding existing requirements under the law or agency policies. This presentation was created and is being co-presented by both FHWA and outside entities. The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are the presenters and do not necessarily reflect those of FHWA or the U.S. Department of Transportation. The contents do not necessarily reflect the official policy of the United States Department of Transportation. All right. As I mentioned a minute ago, today's webinar focuses on identifying and managing organizational risks. The first webinar, which was held on May 29th, focused on identifying and managing financial risks. If you were unable to attend the first webinar, I would encourage you to visit the TAM portal at www.tam-portal.com, where you can access a recording of the first webinar. This webinar is also being recorded and will be posted to that same website. So the learning outcomes that were identified for this webinar series are shown on the screen. By participating in the two webinars, you will be able to achieve these three outcomes as shown on the slide. So here's today's agenda. I'll start with a brief project overview and give a summary of some of the common organizational risks that were found through a literature search of state DOT asset management plans. We're pleased to have representatives from two of our case study states to showcase how they're managing some of the organizational risks that they identified. There will be plenty of time at the end for questions, so please use the chat feature to enter any questions you have for our speakers, and I'll facilitate a Q&A session at the end. So recognizing that financial and organizational risks can significantly impact an agency's ability to implement their asset management plan, the FHWA sought to identify examples showing how DOTs have made strategic decisions to their programs in response to these issues. The results were incorporated into case studies and a summary report to highlight how these practices were implemented and what changes they had or are expected to have on planned asset management investments. I'd like to encourage you to check out the products that were developed under this project, all of which are available on FHWA's asset management website under resources. You'll find two detailed case studies identifying and managing financial risks from Florida and Michigan DOTs, and two case studies on managing organizational risks from the Minnesota and Indiana DOTs. That's what you'll hear about today. And a summary report, identifying and managing financial risks in a TAMP, They're all on that website. I'll mention that Bill Robert provided an overview of the summary report during the first webinar. So again, if you missed that, please go check out the recording. So in a review of the 52 TAMPs from both 2018 and 2019, we identified some common organizational risks. So you see those listed on the slide. Resource issues focused on the loss of institutional knowledge due to a significant number of staff retiring over at that point the next few years, and we've been living that since then. Others noted that workforce skills aren't keeping pace with the rate of change in industry, and that the available supply of workforce may not be able to address agency needs. And then information risks were also commonly identified. This related to the capacity and reliability of computer networks and the pace at which new technology is being adopted, data quality issues, and even outdated or inadequate business systems to support decision-making. We also identified several other types of organizational risks in the TAMPs. A few of these included resistance to change, shifts in political management or philosophies that impact investment priorities, and program delivery issues in which an agency might not be able to deliver the program in a timely manner, which keeps it from delivering on its asset management plans and objectives. Excuse me. All right, so at this point, I'll introduce our two fantastic speakers for today. First, we'll hear from Louis Feagans. Louis is the Indiana DOT Managing Director of System Performance and Transportation Policy. He has over 35 years of transportation experience. During his career, he has worked in asset management, hydraulics, water resources, design, scoping, and project management. He's a professional engineer with a bachelor's degree from the University of Evansville and a master's of science from Purdue University. He's married to his wife, Julie, and has two children, Louis and Mandy. Our second speaker is Trisha Stefanski. Trisha manages the Asset Management Program Office with the Planning Division at Minnesota DOT. Her focus is on asset management, strategic planning, enterprise tool development, performance, data quality and analytics, and interoperability. Nationally, she is a member of TRB AJE 30, Transportation Asset Management Committee, and AKT 70, Maintenance Management Systems Committee. And she is chair of the AASHTO Joint Technical Subcommittee on Data Standardization and co-chair of the Building Smart Roads and Bridges Industry Committee. I also know she is an avid Vikings fan. So welcome, Louis and Trisha. And Louis, I will hand things over to you.
Thanks, Bud. Can you quit sharing so I can show?
Yep. Sorry, let me stop sharing. There we go.
Did I do it right this time, Brad?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks everybody for joining today. Wanted to give a little bit of background on what Indiana has done, where we're going and what we've done. And fortunately or unfortunately, I haven't quite figured it out. We have tested some of this using some of the last few years on risks and challenges. So, some of the challenges I think every state has is the declining conditions. Everybody's infrastructure is aging. One of the biggest challenges that NDOT had was communication, breaking down the silos between planning, programming, capital program. We had a couple of major bills passed, and we had a lot of money that we did a lot of major improvements, but we kind of forgot about some of the preservation approach. and then just really trying to update our process. So like I said, you had MAP 21 that started requiring, asset management, and then in Indiana in 2016 and 2017, we passed a gas tax, and the key of that gas tax was improving our roads and our bridges, modernizing them, and trying to, make a better state, better crossroads of Indiana. To do that, one of the challenges, like I said earlier, we had silos. We had bridge, the bridge section, we had the road section, we had the culvert section. And at no time could those organizations and those teams talk. That was taboo. We had to worry about our money, our asset, and trying to improve our product, and not really looking at the big picture. So in 2017, we started a reorganization and improving the process and improving the organization structure. So Indiana is divided into 6 districts with central office in Indianapolis. We have over 29,000 miles, over almost 6,000 bridges, 92 counties. And one of the things that we brag about, as you can see, is we're the crossroads of Indiana. So we have several major highways coming through Indiana and Indianapolis. One of the biggest challenges, like I said earlier, was defining roads and who was going to make the final decision. Road design had their goals, bridge design had and bridge asset had their goals, and nobody really wanted to work together at times. We were always trying to, well, it's my money this, or my product this, or this is my program. If you want to do something, you have to bring money. So it was a challenge trying to decide who was going to go, how we were going to work together. I'm making it sound a lot worse probably than what it was, but we had challenges. And we really didn't have any good long-range goals. So part of House Amendment Act 1002 was we developed a long-range goals to improve our roads and bridges. One of the first things that we did was develop life cycle strategies. So every road, every bridge segment has, for roads, what we're going to do to that road over the next 20 years. That includes capital program, that includes maintenance, that includes, adding safety and mobility stuff to it as well. We developed scoping app that works together. Recently, we've developed a field check app that everybody can do their field checks by using an app and using video. And then we developed a new improved scoping application that allows everyone to see the scope and to work together. And you'll see some GIS things later on in my presentation. So now, instead of having 4 silos, bridge, statewide payment, and tech services, we have one department, and Jeremy Hunter is now the new managing director of asset management. And everybody reports to Jeremy, and he's the final say in the process. We've developed data governance. One of the first challenges that we had was, do we need to collect data? What data do we need to collect? So we developed a process statewide, not just in asset management, on how are we going to maintain and collect data. Do we need to collect data? And what data do we need to have? So we have many different systems. We have our race, we have our bridge system, we have our capital program system, we've got CAD, we got our project management system, and then we got construction systems. And up until a few years ago, none of those systems wanted to talk together. So we're working on that aspect of it as well. And then bringing in, making sure that we collect the information that we need and make sure it goes across all the agency. So one of the first things that we did, like I said, was develop our life cycle. For roads, it's 20 years. After a couple of years, we determined that bridges, we needed more than 20 years. A lot of times the next, capital program method would be out 25, 30, even 40 years out. So we've developed a longer range plan for bridges, and then we developed detailed business rules and how and what we were going to do with each asset. Like I said, that included both capital and operations. So crack sealing, chip sealing, process like that. Once we had those plans, we had our initial scope. And so we started working with our capital program saying, okay, this is our scope. We don't need to do and fix everything at one time. We have a plan now, and we can go back and use that plan. So we don't need to fix a pipe that has 10 or 15 years life left in it, because we're going to be coming back in 7 or 8 years or 10 years and fix that pipe at that time. So that's one of the challenges I think many states have, and I know we had, was we want to fix everything at one time, and that caused scope creep and definitely cost increases. Now that we have the life cycle plan, we can go back to the capital program team and say, look, we understand that you want to fix the pipe. You want to fix this aspect of the project. But the goal of this is a purely preservation job to buy 7 or 10 years of life till we can get to the bigger process. We don't need to do all the work that we can have. And that's even becoming more critical today with the high inflation and challenges that we're having with cost increase. We're going back to those initial scopes and really owning those process. One of the other things that we've developed is bundling. So now that we have the life cycle plan, we're going, sitting down and looking at 3, 5, 6 years ahead using the bundling program and finding when is the best time to do the work. So I want to do the road project in 2029. Bridge had projects in 2030 or 31 or in 27. Using the bundling program, we were able to look and say, hey, let's move some of these projects and develop a better product, both for the agency so we can get more done for the, one MOT, but also for the community. So we're not going back and forth and modifying and hitting the same area. One year we do a road project, the next year we do a bridge project, the third year we'll do a safety project. We're doing all those projects at one time. How did we develop this? One of the biggest keys, we started using GIS and collecting that information, pulling the information up. So here's our drainage asset view where you can click on a pipe, a small structure, pull that information up and see the condition and how many pipes and stuff like what you had. Back in 2016, when we were doing the House Enrollment Act 1002, didn't have a good number of how many culverts we had. I asked them, like, how many do we have? And they said, oh, we have between 60 to 120,000. It's like, count of how many culverts. One of the things that our commissioner hit us up first was, he drives the road and he meets with congressmen and representatives and mayors. Want to know what's going on the road in their community. So now we have a straight line diagram, so you can pull off the side of the road and pull up what we're going to do. Use that 20-year plan and say, in this year we're going to be doing payment, and mill and fill or small structure, but in 15 years or 10 years, we're going to be doing that. So we can start working with communities and developing better plans. We've got our 20-year plan editor. So every year we can pull up the asset and what's going on with the asset and what's going to be showing up in that region. So we can make sure that we don't close every road in Indianapolis going north or every road in Connersville going north or east. We can look at that plan and we can work with construction and work with design and make sure we align the projects up to meet the needs. Like I said, we developed a detailed scoping application. It makes sure, one of the nice things, it pulls in all the information easily to AADT, county, district, representatives, NBI numbers, stuff like that. It pre-populates all that information for the scoping engineer so they can just get into scoping it. But it also allows for them to have checkoffs. So is there right of way? Is there environmental issues? Is there utilities? They have to click on each one of those things before project. Then it allows us to pull all that information in instead of hand typing it back into our project management system. It automatically uploads into our new system, reducing time. It's cut off at least 2 to 3 days of uploading projects into our system. So where are we headed next and what are we doing? Like I said, we're really working on the bundling app, trying to look at that long range process. We've had to, like I said, increase our life expectancy for bridges, so we're looking at a longer life aspect on that. Now we're realizing that in year 2045, we're going to have bridge issues with condition. So we're taking a step back and looking at what do we need to do to make sure that we don't create a new bubble of bridges needing to be replaced. So it's allowing us to do some long range planning. Like I said, with the increase in costs and inflation, it's allowed us to reanalyze our process and our program to meet the new funding and the new cost process. It's been a challenge on that aspect. I think everybody's been hit by inflation. So it's really allowed us, instead of taking a month or 2 months to figure out how we want to reprogram our process, we've gone in, updated cost estimates, and looked at, okay, if we take these routes and make them a chip seal, we go with a longer capital program process. How much does that affect maintenance? So we're finding out how much does it affect maintenance? How does it affect capital program? And we're doing it in a week or two versus months of having to go out and drive roads and figure out roads. So it's allowed us to better communicate and work together, a lot better process. We're moving beyond pavement and bridges. We started with large culverts. We've added small culverts. We're starting to add signals, MSE walls, trying to figure out a process to do noise walls, overhead signs, and developing that process in those life cycle strategies as well. And one of the biggest questions I always get, is it working? So the answer is yes. You can see in 2017, our good and fair bridge condition was around 95. We're up to 97.1. And our bridge conditions were going down. Our road conditions were going down at 89%, and now we're up to 94.3%. So we're making a change, we're making improvements, and we're allowing our process to work. That was the highlight. I know I'm not sure if we're saving questions now, Brad, or we're going to do those at the end.
Thanks, Louis. That was great. Save questions for the end. So if folks can please enter questions in the chat you have for Louis, we'll have plenty of time to get to those. And Trisha, I'll hand things over to you.
How does that look? Probably should we start in the middle of the presentation or the end?
How long is it?
Everybody knows how long it is. That's kind of nice, right? Like when you're stuck in traffic, we have these little timers that tell you how long it's going to take. And it's always proven to be better to know than not know. So thank you so much for having me today. My name is Trisha Stefanski, and I manage our asset management program office, I guess we're calling it now. So it used to be project office, now it's program office. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about how we have considered risk in managing our ancillary assets. And when the word ancillary asset comes up, I usually raise my hand. I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it. I feel like these ancillary assets get forgotten sometimes. And so I'd like to talk about it. Today, I'm going to give you a little bit about the background. I think, as Brad would say, please go and read the case study. For us to spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes today talking about these things is difficult because there's so much to this. There's so much background. But I really want you to, anything that I can help you with in the future, anything I can give to you so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'm sure you can do all this work way faster than we could. I talk about our risk analysis, give you some recommendations on what we came up with, how we're handling things, talk about those risk management outcomes and next steps. So here's the background. So I feel like, again, from the day that I came to MnDOT, I basically said, what? We're not collecting as-built data. We don't have an as-built program. We don't have kind of a program developed around ancillary assets. We were doing all kinds of work. Please don't get me wrong. We're collecting a lot of great GPS data using the more wonderful words, the acronym GIS, but we weren't bringing that together for what I would call a program. We went out on the ledge and we're still okay. And I want to reinforce the fact that we're doing great, even though we included more than pavement and bridge within our TAMPs. So 6 assets right off the bat. We were one of 3 states in that original TAMP. We included 6 assets. You can see those there: pavement, bridge, culverts, steam, or deep stormwater tunnels, overhead signs, and high mass light structures. And then we added 6 more asset classes. I think the people working on the TAMP were not that happy about it. It was 6 extra working groups. It took a lot more time. But really what I'm learning is that a lot of states are managing their ancillary assets. They're just not maybe including them in their TAMP. So we added noise walls, signals, lighting, pedestrian infrastructure, buildings, and ITS. We also, at the same time, 2015, we were implementing a very large enterprise asset management system that I've probably spoke on, again, for lots and lots of slides here, but not this time. Not going to talk to that. But 2015, we have over 16 asset classes within that system. We also have a bridge system, we have a building system, but that system is highly integrated. And I feel like that system has been very successful for MnDOT in building our ancillary asset program. We also integrated with existing planning processes, which I will talk about in a couple slides. So what were our objectives? Kind of when we started looking at this, we said, you know what, we don't have unlimited resources. I always tell maintenance, just write on the board, we don't have enough people, we don't have enough money. So we need to right size, we need to prioritize, we need to determine where should we be spending money, what's our best return on investment for those assets. We also need to improve the ability to evaluate trade-offs. I think for me as an asset management specialist, the top of the pyramid is saying, hey, what if we invest more money in signal systems? What if we invest more money in signs? What does that mean for the other asset classes? So really having that ability to say, we want to know how those asset classes are impacted. And the only way to do that is to have the data, understand the data. We also want to integrate asset management into agency culture. And we also have an asset management program office, as I mentioned, which has been huge to say this isn't a side job that we're doing this full time and we're going to communicate. And if a week doesn't probably go by that I'm not doing some sort of presentation internally or externally to really talk about the benefits and really talk about what is asset management. So here's the background with coordinating and planning efforts. And everybody probably looks different here within your own DOT. And I don't love getting into specifics because, you know, plug and play, right, wherever you are. I think a couple of points I would make here is that we have a large multimodal plan. We talk about multimodal. We really aim for multimodal. And then we get into these kind of smaller dedicated groups of plan. We have MinShip, which is a 20-year capital only plan. And then we actually, you know, program our STIP and our CHIP in that 10-4 years. So we're really getting from high level vision, then more into strategy, then into implementation. And throughout that whole Minship, we're in the investment or the highway plan, all the way into where are we making those decisions. We want that TAMP to line up. We want to know those ancillary assets are there. We have data for some, not for others. How does that line up? And we use our TAMP system, which I mentioned, our enterprise asset management system to provide that data. And then we monitor and we react. And so I think this family of plan system has really worked well for us, making things, both strategic as well as implementable. Let's talk about the risk analysis part of this. As an engineer, I like to talk about risk, but I also love to talk about risk mitigation. So risk is prevalent throughout the enterprise, throughout our projects, lots of places that risk is there. If you're a project manager, you talk about risk. So really saying, for our ancillary assets, what are the risks if we do manage them, if we don't manage them? So potential risks are obviously higher life cycle costs. I look at noise walls as an example. If you put in a concrete noise wall, there's not a lot you need to do with it. If you put in a wood noise wall, how long does it last? What are we doing to that wall throughout the life? We really want to maximize those life cycle costs and extend the life. There could be unpredicted failures due to limited inventory. I don't know about you throughout the country, but we are suffering from flooding right now, major flooding. I've seen pictures today. So looking at culverts, if the culvert's functioning, if it's working, if it's going to be there, when we have severe floods, that's important to know. We also want to make sure that we're not increasing the long-term cost of system preservation. So if we're not doing the right thing at the right time, overall, we're going to really increase that whole cost of preservation. System inefficiencies due to lack of well-defined roles and responsibilities. So this one's kind of an interesting, it's a little change, right? Now we're talking about people. So when we started saying, who's in charge of these assets? Who's looking at, earth retaining structures or MSE walls, as Lewis said, who's doing that? Who's doing inspection? What's happening? There was a lot of gaps. And so we went through a huge effort. I could send anyone, I think it was probably in Access. Don't tell IT, but we did it in Access, and we looked at all these questions through all these assets and said, who's doing what? Where do we have the gaps? Brought that to a steering committee and really tried to fill some of those gaps in. That was a great effort. There's also risks and inconsistencies between planned and implementation strategies. So if you're saying, our Minship and our capital plan is this, we really want to invest in roadside infrastructure, but we're not doing that in our STIP and our CHIP. Why? So that's what can happen, I think, those potential risks when you're not managing ancillary assets. And then the underestimation of maintenance and operations. I came from the maintenance area, moved into planning, but I see the impacts. We see the impacts when we do not invest on the capital side with what happens in maintenance, and we need more data to talk about that and understand those maintenance needs. So what did we do? We created an asset management strategic implementation plan. I think Lori's going to put a link at some point to our MnDOT TAM portal, so you can go look yourself. There's lots of great things, one-pagers, presentations, but it goes through what we did in the AMSIP. So and Brad was with me for months. I talk about our super great friendship, and we were sitting together every week doing matrix development. But these are, let me just see if I can move. My face is kind of in the way. Okay, there. These are the different groups. Now you could do this any which way in your agency, but these were the areas that we thought we needed more work. These are maybe the gap areas. So matrix development, we established a prioritized approach based on agency practice, relative importance, and the risks to what data are we going to collect, what are we going to do for these ancillary assets, and I'll get into that. We looked at specifically geotechnical assets, which are in Minnesota state statute that we collect inventory for these, oh yeah, it says that state legislature, for these assets. So we included those. We did pavement preservation. We said we really want to reduce the life cycle costs. So we looked at pavement preservation and performance measures, and then we built up this communication. So you can see how, again, in my engineering brain, right? We looked at the risks and we looked at ways to mitigate the risks and where the gap areas were, and we worked on those. That TAM portal is a huge piece of that communication plan, and doing like my constant sort of communication of what we're doing in asset management. And then TAMP implementation. What other recommendations for TAMP changes that could be out there that would improve, strengthen relationship, create that implementation piece of the TAMP? So where did we come from, or where did we end up with? And again, without going too long, oh, I forgot to start my timer. So if you need to come in and stop me, please do, Brad or Lori. So asset tiers. So this is one of the key, I think, decisions, the key outcomes that were made within that matrix work group. And this isn't easy. This was decision makers really sitting down, looking at this, thinking about this, getting input from the districts on where we should be. And I'm just going to touch on these slightly. Again, lots of information here, but tier 1 assets are really the assets that would give you, a network level risk. A combination of high funds, high bucks, bridges, pavements, rest areas, but if a failure happened or if something happened to them, it would create more of a network level risk. Tier 2, we also have risk that can happen at a network level, but maybe not as high of an investment. So being able to sort of put these assets into different tiers gave us a way to say, now, how will we manage these assets and what are the importance of these assets? Tier 3, I think individual local impacts, not overall performance. I have some notes. And then those assets also will benefit from doing cyclical inspection and looking at those. So I think in here, yeah, like lighting is a good example. Signals, I think signals may be moved up because of the impact, but really looking at those as more of a cyclical frequency. And then tier 4, limited risk to network. We didn't have as many guidance related to maintenance. You can see concrete noise walls, snow fences, trees. So this really starts to help you kind of differentiate how you manage the risks. This is another key piece of it. We did the tier exercise based on risk, but then we also said, now what does that mean for data? How are we going to manage these assets? How are we going to do maintenance on these assets? And what data are we going to collect? So you can see different categories here, from condition driven plus, which is the highest management category, to what we call minimal maintenance. Pick your words, whatever words you want to use there, but really being more reactive, no condition, no inventory. So those are some of the different categories that we use to really differentiate the assets. And just for time's sake, I'm going to sort of leave it there, but let me know and go look at the TAM portal if you have any more questions on kind of what assets sit in what category. We looked at this and again said, what are the questions that we're asking to manage these assets, and then what data? How do we get the data? How do we decide what data? So you could see minimal maintenance. Nope, we're not doing an inventory. We're not doing additional. If it's reactive, we're going to get an inventory. If it's cycle driven, from there up, we're going to get inventory data. Does it require a maintenance cycle? Does it require asset condition data? Now we're starting with that at cycle driven plus. So again, we can't do everything as an agency. We really need to decide what's the most important, why, what is the value, and then go back and say, this is where we're going to be collecting the data. So after we went through that effort, we had some final recommendations that came out of these wonderful working groups. And like I said, what are we going to do and what are we not going to do? So we're going to discontinue investment in data collection for curb and gutter, gravel shoulders, roadway ditches. Now that doesn't mean that districts are not collecting certain pieces of data, but as an agency, we decided these are things we're not going to do due to resources. We also said continue doing what we're doing for pavements and bridges, culverts. We're doing great work with tunnels, way stations, so continue to do that great work. And then we need to do a little bit more for our signs, mainline and local culverts to reduce the risks in data gap. And we're going to also continue to look at more things like storm sewer. What data can we collect in the future? We had the 5-year plan basically for that data, or as resources existed. The working group said, hey, there's some other things we did that were kind of cool. I think I did another webinar maybe or a little bit on this where we said, okay, culverts, we have 75 attributes or properties. How valuable is it? Are you using those attributes? What is the value? And we reduced the number. I didn't get as much reduction with the culvert group as I had wanted, but really looked at, we need to decide how much data we're going to use. And we might, again, right size those data and attribution. We did the communication on the asset management roles and responsibilities. Here's what we're expecting. Here's what we'd like as an agency. You'll see those one-pagers on the TAM guide. We also, and I think we have more improvement, it's so great to see the project scoping app that you have in Indiana. We need to do more work in project scoping, but we did start to estimate, get repair costs for projects outside the STIP. We're looking high priority repairs. And then performance measures, performance monitoring. We have a lot of performance measures. And right now we just started a project to look at how we're going to distribute maintenance and operations costs based on performance and asset management. So that's going to be an exciting project we'll have over the next year. And then we have damage restitution revenue that's always coming in. It's very important that we track our I call it the WOM, the work order costs. And then we have a lot going on with research and technology like AI. And that's why I'm sitting on some of these data standardization committees. So here's our culvert inspection plan. This is just an example. What happens when you plan? Well, you can look at it. You can say, here's what we're going to be doing. Here's how we're going to handle this. So here's an example. This is the one image that I have, I think, and it's got GIS in it just for everybody's sake and mapping. So what are outcomes and next steps? I really think risk management is something that we need to continually be looking at. Risks are changing, flooding, resiliency, climate. So really, I would say, and that's probably not on the slide, but really continuing to look at these asset classes, looking at where we are as an agency and trying to implement risk in different areas. It will reduce inefficiencies and uncertainties in planning. We'll get a better understanding of our operational needs, again, which are changing. We'll keep our compliance with, in Minnesota, they love asset management, and we have a lot of state legislation around it. We'll understand those asset-specific risks. So at this culvert, what is the risk? Also, we'll understand the project level risk, we'll understand the network level risks, and we'll lower life cycle costs, and we'll improve communication and collaboration within the agency, which we have hands down. I love working for MnDOT. So next steps, we're going to continue these outreach activities to build interest and engagement. Never stops. You'll probably see me in a couple weeks again. We're going to monitor the status of the asset management recommendations, strategic implementation plan. We're going to use those priorities which were established within the matrix, and we went to senior and executive leadership and basically got those recommendations turned into policy. We could possibly add additional assets to the TAMP. Trying to think, I just read California's TAMP. They have a lot of assets. I don't know if we need to be the best, but our planning staff are busy. So they're probably like, Trish, no. We're going to continue to advance the use of data. So I just wanted to talk, and I'm probably almost out of time, but on a couple things here, I would encourage everyone to look at the grants that are available and try to write a grant or get help writing a grant, because it's amazing the grants that are out there. So I wrote a grant. I'd never written a grant before. It wasn't very fun. I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to quit my day job and write grants, but it was a really eye-opening experience. And Minnesota was one of 10 states selected for the ADCMS grant, which we're going to look at interoperability. We're going to look at all of our data, say, how can we prioritize the interoperability of our data, which I think lowers a lot of risk as an agency. We're doing more QA/QC when it comes to data. So the second you flip on that new enterprise system and you see the data in it, it's really good to have QA/QC in place so you can start using it. We had to wait for several years really to start using our data. We're implementing fleet and PMS within our enterprise asset management. So both of those systems, if you think about fleet, you manage fleet a lot like you manage an asset. I mean, it basically is an asset. And then we're monitoring results. We just did a big study on electrical services to say, what happens if we do more preventive maintenance? When should we be doing preventive maintenance? So really looking at kind of that ancillary asset and getting great decision-making ability. And then we also are providing more screening information. We're saying, okay, we have a resiliency improvement plan and priorities. How can we supply data? What can we do to kind of help with those resiliency decisions? That is it for me. And I hope that wasn't too long. I'm sorry, Brad.
No, it was absolutely perfect. You are right on time.
Okay.
And to the second. So thank you very much, Trisha and Louis. Feel free to leave that slide up there, Trisha. We've reached the question and answer portion of today's program. And so please enter your questions in the comments. We'll get to as many as we can. Louis, feel free to rejoin, and I have a couple questions for you guys to get started. We have at least one in the chat, so we're good to go here. I'll give Trisha a chance to catch her breath. That was fantastic. Thank you. Louis, I know your efforts were implemented at the start of a 10-year funding bill at the state level, which you are now in year 7 or 8 or so of. So thinking about kind of that financial risk and its potential impact on your organization and the organizational risk that presents, could you talk a little bit about how you're kind of preparing for that and how that's impacting your operations?
Thanks. Start off a nice, easy question to start off with, Brad. So it's been a challenge. I mean, just the inflation the last 2.5 years have really hit us hard. So having the process now, having the life cycle and the DTIMS modeling and just the process of risk looking has been really helpful. So with the inflation, we are starting to work with our General Assembly and Governor to say, hey, we're doing a great job. We've improved our roads and our bridges. We're adding new assets. We're seeing the big picture and really working with them on let's keep the momentum going. Let's take our current governor's motto is take it to the next level, and we've been really working hard to take it to the next level and showing them we produced what we told them we would produce and the process that we would produce. So we've had a little bit of, I laughed and said, making sure we don't close both roads in and out of the city. We've came close to doing that a couple of times. So we've had a little bit pushback of people like, we know we complained about potholes. We know we complained about road and bridge conditions. Can you give us a break? You guys are fixing stuff a little bit too fast. But that's where I'm hoping that the bundling process will come in and look in that long range process to try to zoom in and bring in stuff. But it's been a challenge. I think every state's had that challenge over the last couple of years. So.
Thanks. Excellent. It's kind of the governor's motto in your pitch back to them. Thanks, Louis. And Trisha, quick question for you. So you kind of provided a really great overview of how you looked at kind of prioritizing the different asset tiers and looking at the risks related to kind of asset failure, deterioration. So how you want to manage those assets and the data that's needed. And from that came up with kind of a risk-based data collection plan where you were counting on some bundling of data collection, some efforts that might be able to collect data on more than one asset at a time. So could you talk a little bit about that and if you've been able to see the benefits and cost savings that you were hoping from some of that data collection bundling?
That's like a data question for me, the data person. Thank you, Brad. Yeah, we really, it's kind of like we met with 60 stakeholder groups to literally say, what data do we need as an agency? And we have built on the AMSIP. So we kind of knew where we were, right? We knew what we were collecting, what we weren't with regards to asset classes, but we also have like a linear referencing system. We also have like shoulder needs, width needs. There were some other things that you just don't even think about. We have bridge clearance. Now, although we said, bridge is a priority 1 asset, what is the data we're going to collect with that? And so, yes, we have done in 2018, we're just wrapping up within days, another LiDAR project, imagery project, in which we're going to be obtaining a lot of wonderful data for the districts. We're asking for district review, and that's been great. But that's one way we've bundled the data. We've also looked at what can we do with the pavement van. How can we utilize our existing pavement vans and get more rich data there? We've kept that a little separate, but I think in the future, all of this will merge. And I mean, my Right now, my wheelhouse, Brad, has been more building information modeling or better information management or digital delivery. And when you look at how we're going to be bringing data full life cycle, we're saying we're bringing data all from asset management. We're going to utilize it for design and survey. We're going to add to that, edit that data. We're going to have it all formatted in the right, way for the systems. And then we're going to verify that data in the field. So we've done a lot of work on efficiencies of data collection of saying we have the data in the right format. We have it out there for our inspectors and our surveyors. We're going to verify it. Maybe we'll update location with LiDAR. We could do that. But I think that is really important, and saying, how can we manage this data more effectively? And as you look at 3D modeling, 3D design, and how the world is changing, into shapes, right, versus lines, points, that's also going to impact, I think, the way, again, that we collect data and the way that we're utilizing data from like 3D to 2D. So as we move, the tilt-a-whirl moves at the same time.
Hey, Brett, on that one, we're getting some pushback a little bit on making sure we don't collect too much data.
Yeah.
We'll have maintenance guys and stuff. We started relooking at like collecting data on signs, and it's like, look, with your long range plan now, and when we know when we're going to be back there and data, why don't we buy cheaper signs and start just replacing them every 7 years? And not have the data to collect and stuff like that too. So we were kind of like Trisha, we're trying to collect as much information and to use it, but then I'm starting to get pushback of saying, we don't need this information because you guys got this information instead. So it's been kind of an eye-opening experience for us too.
Interesting, thanks. All right, I'm going to go to the chat, and we have a question for both speakers. So could you speak to executive level recognition of organizational risks and the need to get executives involved in strategies to mitigate those risks? How did you get their support with the material that you presented? I don't know who wants to take a
Do you
first
want
stab.
me to start? I feel like
Go
if
for it.
anyone knows some of the people that I started working with a long time, like a Tim Hankel and a Gene Wallace, you would realize they were huge supporters of risk long time ago. So that's been easier, I suppose. But I just looking back or thinking about, Brad, what you presented on organizational risk, what were your categories? Workforce and
Yeah, I was resources and information. So resources
yeah.
was really workforce was the big one, and then information was IT systems and data.
So a couple things that we've done in Minnesota. Well, I have fought for resources to say we need, well, Dave did really Soulsrud, but we need a dedicated office. And I see, Lewis, you did that too. We need a dedicated asset management office. I think we were doing asset management, again, within parts of the agency, but that dedication to asset management really made a difference. I think that dedication to asset management, as well as we've hired data scientists, so that's been a shift. We have more analytics folks. We want to bring maintenance, just speaking of maintenance, we want to bring maintenance people up actually through into design, open up kind of our agency for folks that may not have, a college degree or other things, because we see the benefit to that as well, about teaching and learning our work or advancing our workforce, as well as their strong background, right, in maintenance and what they know about it. So we've really looked at different ways, I think, that we can handle workforce. And then the other thing is I fought for is to have district asset management district specialists in each district. And so saying asset management should not be far away from your job. It should be really close to where you are. So we've kicked off some of those positions as well that will be helping us understand what each district needs.
Thanks.
I mean, she hit almost all the key things on us. We kind of had the advantage. We had the House Enrollment Act 1002 that said we've got to start planning. We started come up with a 20-year plan. Our, Commissioner Smith, one of the slides, I call it the Mike app because he's driving the roads and he's getting questions, and it's like he kept calling me. He's like, "Hey, what's going on here? What's going on here? I don't like this road condition." It's like, Mike, if you pull up your app, you can look at it, and it's like, so I can beat him to it. It's like, looking at where you're at, I can pull up exactly where you're at, and here's what's going on. Here's what we've done. This is what we're going to do. Having that at people's fingertips has been really helpful. Same thing with Indiana. We've got the dream, we've got asset engineers in every district for road and bridge. We've really given the district a lot more power to make decisions and to bring stuff up. And then my dream, and we're not quite there yet, but my dream is to have our 20-year, we have our homepage open up, and then right behind it is our 20-year plan, and it's right there, and it is on the front of the screen, but it's not opening up with them automatically when they click on the internet. But that's where I want to get us to, is like everything, all that information, that risk, those conditions. If you're working with a community, you're putting, orders there and deals there, laws there. Everything is at people's fingertips. So we're starting to see that. We don't have as much paper in file cabinets for someone to lose or to get mad and throw away when they walk out. So collecting that information stuff too.
Thanks. I think we have time for another question or two. Louis, a quick one to you. I know a lot of what you implemented in Indiana was to help provide organizational stability through change. And I know you've also seen some, as one of that resource risk we talked about, some staff changes as you are implementing and kind of after you established a lot of your office. Are there certain aspects of what you set up with your organization that you feel have been particularly helpful in managing through those staff changes?
Quit asking me questions. It has. I mean, I think breaking down the silos, having one person to, break the tie, having, a managing director of asset management has really helped. Having one voice, kind of bringing both sides together and bringing all the assets together. I mean, we're bringing in kind of like Minnesota signals and overhead signs, ITS, where they didn't want the ownership of it, and then nobody had the ownership of it. So now that we've got the department, more of those assets are coming to us, and we're expanding. We're not putting stuff into the TAMP just because of the challenges of reporting, but we're putting it as an appendix of showing, how we're collecting the data and information, what we think would do, but we're not actually putting it in our TAMP to own yet. We want some more experience on that, but I really think having that ownership and that one person to communicate for all the assets has been really key for us.
Thanks, Louis. We have a question that just came in, and Trish, I'm going to give you the last word in a minute or less. You both talked about life cycle planning for ancillary assets and geotechnical assets. Are there plans? Could you talk about how you analyze performance of those assets, and are there plans to include them in the LCP processes similar to pavements and bridge assets in the future?
Yeah, I'll be really brief. So we are doing life cycle planning for all of our assets in the TAMP. We might be treating them differently. It might be condition-based, it might be age-based. The performance measures that we create might be slightly different. But we're doing it. We're looking at those assets and we're saying, what would we do when, and how much does that cost? And let's look at the life cycle. Let's look at a before and after of those assets. So check out our TAMP for more information, I would say.
Thank you. And that was perfect timing. We've reached the end of our hour in this special edition of the FHWA AASHTO TAM webinar series. Thank you all for your attention and your questions. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us, and we would be glad to answer any more that you may have. Thank you very much to our speakers and to Lori for your support, and to Tasha Clemens, who oversaw this project. Take care, everyone.